Good morning. With me this morning is Danny Shelton, the founder, president of Three Angels Broadcasting Network, a network that is taking the everlasting gospel by satellite around the world. It is a pleasure to be talking with you, Danny, today, and we're speaking on a very important topic, the claimed archaeological findings of Ron Wyatt of Nashville, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. What interested me after several days, and we knew that we were going to have to be leaving, Ron said, I said, where's your original hole? And he said, original entry is right here. And over to the left of where these men were digging, for instance, let me give you an example. They were digging this direction. He says the Ark of the Covenant was here. So my little mind says, why are we digging this way and then this way when the Ark of the Covenant is over here? Because he says the original hole is right here. It looked like it was probably no more than 24 inches in diameter, possibly a little more. He said, this is where I dropped down, and here's where I said, why don't we do that? And he said, well, a lot of rock fell in when I was leaving. A rock came in and filled up that hole. And I still, in my little mind, I'm not an archaeologist, and I said, it sure seems like it'd be much easier to go down and dig out that rock, you know, take buckets and hand it up, than it would be digging through hard dirt and ground and running through rocks and all kinds of things here below the city, closer to the original site of the city. Why, I don't understand.
It seems fairly obvious, but what were your goals? What did you hope to achieve when you got to Jerusalem?
Well, it's very simple. I expected to go down into a hole. I expected to watch the dig for a day or two. We wanted to have the cameras as we got closer and closer, and when we entered the room with the Ark of the Covenant, we wanted to get all this on video. Then we wanted to bring it out and present this to the world, not only on 3ABN, but we knew that TV stations around the world would want to see this. What Ron told me was, he said if I could get the 3ABN crew, if I could get you to come over, I want you to have the exclusivity on this. He said, I do have a problem in that I need $10,000. He said, I have a machine that detects gold, and I need to get a new machine, this equipment, and I can't tell you the name of the equipment, but the equipment that I need is going to cost me $10,000. He said, what I'll do is I'll buy this piece of equipment, I'll bring it over, but since I'm not going back and I'm going to be in Jerusalem, I need $10,000 cash because I'm going on to another find somewhere. And so with 3ABN, there's no way I would take 3ABN money on something, if I could use the term, a gamble like this. But what I have found out, he'd taken numbers of other people besides just us. I think he's done this probably over the years a number of times, and I don't know it for a fact, but from what I can understand in the picture I get, many people have donated lots of money thinking this was going to happen, and of course it didn't. When we went down, Harold Follett said, I'm going to go, you know, I feel responsible. I've got Danny involved, 3ABN, I've got this donor involved, I feel responsible. So he said one night, I'm going to go down in this original hole. And Ron said, you're not going to go in that original hole. And so they were on the street corner there in Jerusalem, and when Harold insisted, Ron threatened to, I don't know the right terms, but threatened to hit him. And I actually was in between them, not a place I wanted to be, ever liked to be, but I was like trying to stop this, and Ron told me, if you don't get him away from me, you know, something to the term, I'm going to punch his lights out. I couldn't give you the exact words, but that type of phraseology, I'm going to punch his lights out, and I'm saying, so why are you so upset? Because we just want to do what you've told us was there, and why shouldn't he go see? We found the truth why he didn't want us to go down, because we did get a rope and light, and Harold took a little pick, and my brothers and I, we went against Ron's, even though Ron was very upset, and we went on that evening. I remember that it was raining, and we went over into the garden tomb and went down, and Harold went to the hole. We led him down, very tight fit. He actually had to hold his hands above him in order to get down. When he got very low, we could still talk to him. We had rope under his armpit so we could get him back up. And when he got to the bottom, he said it did open up, just as Ron had said. There was maybe a little 5-by-5 room. The only difference is with flashlight and a little pick, it was solid rock all the way around. The hole went nowhere. The cave just stopped. There had never been, never...
No passageway leading in any direction?
No, solid. You can, and you don't have to be an archaeologist or someone very intelligent to know when you're against solid rock that's been there for thousands of years.
Now, you told me that the rock had fallen down, or at least
Ron
had told you that large amount of rock had fallen down into that cave, and that's what made it impassable.
Yeah, that's what he said. But again, as I've already mentioned, it was solid all the way around. When we brought Harold up, he said absolutely is as solid as any rock that you see around here. There's never been an opening. Nothing was ever filled. And so that, of course, was the reason Ron didn't want us to go down. We surmised that. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that one out, because now, you know, he's been exposed.
I'm Dr. Don Patton, a consulting geologist in Port Arthur, Texas. None of our team get any salary or any income from this. This is a piece of wood from a site that has claimed to be the site of Noah's Ark. It's actually a site that has been built like a movie set. I was taken by the fellow who had been working with Parachute for years and actually had built the site. It's not an easily accessible place, but I'll be 70 years old in less than a year, and I made it. And so I don't think accessibility is the reason why he's not showing it to people. When you see pictures, you just see this narrow view. You don't see backup and context. That would, of course, expose the fraud. And they'll say, well, it's too dangerous to get there. Well, it's not. I got there and didn't have that big a problem. There are some stationary glaciers, but they're fairly rare. This one is a very, very steep mountainside that it's on, and it's moving rapidly down the hill. One of the clues and obvious indications is it's full of rocks, and it's sampling those rocks as it travels. The ice moves something like a tractor tread, and it will pick up pieces and just grind them up, and you have dirty ice and debris in it, and it's moving pretty rapidly. And so in the few months since the movies have been made, it's moved enough to destroy what they built. If it were moving a foot a day, it wouldn't surprise me at all. If your house is moving down the hill a foot a day, in a few months it's going to be all twisted and distorted, and certainly if it's made of ice. A Chinese evangelistic group and Mr. Parachute, who is a Turkish resident. This is the evangelistic group in Hong Kong. I think they are probably deceived. The story that we got was that Parachute built this movie set, and then it would be inspected by Parachute and some of those working with him. A couple of the Chinese are in on the fraud, and if it's appropriate, if it's right, then they'll go ahead and make the movie. If it's not right, they'll have to change it. And once they get it built appropriately, they call Hong Kong, they come make the movie, and then they announce to the world they found the Ark. So now the people in Hong Kong, I've met them, I know them well, I've been their guest in Hong Kong. I would like to think they're being deceived. But the people here, especially Mr. Parachute and the two Chinese that are here in Dogobasit, they know better. They're a part of the fraud. They're participating in it. And they have financially backed Mr. Parachute, and they've made the claim that they found Noah's Ark, and they have walls of wood that they have built. Right now, however, there is nothing to be seen because it's all going charging down the mountain. When you look into the crevasse, you can see the wood from the demolished wall at the bottom. This is, of course, in the summer. After a number of months, we see the wood has come apart. It has, as a result of the moving glacier and the melting, demolished what had been built. When you look at this spot, you see the actual place where the picture was taken when it was beautifully built months earlier. This is according to the one who did the building, who took us to the spot and showed it to us. And when you compare that with the pictures on the website, you see first, from this perspective, a very different view. It's much lower, it's down in the crevasse, and looks very much like a confined room, perhaps in the Ark. But when you look at a larger context, a picture now from their own website, you see this is in the bottom of a crevasse, and it's wood that is built into the wall. And that's especially obvious when you see this larger context from the top of the crevasse, again from their own website. Here is the wood that is built into the wall, and it's a fraud. Now, looking at it at the lower right-hand corner, you see that looks pretty much like a room in the Ark. But at the bottom of a crevasse, That's a very different picture. It's wood built into the ice. This is the way it looked months later in the middle of the summer with meltwater at the bottom and floating debris from the wood that they had built into the wall. This is an obvious fraud. They brought wood. It is very carefully charred, and you can see the even black ring around the edge, I guess you would say, maybe a millimeter. As you look at the cracked area, you can actually see fresh wood in the cracks. It's just a surface phenomenon. It has been burned, as you can tell. But this is fresh wood, something like you might find in an orange crate. It's not balsa wood, but it's not much heavier. It is heavier, but not a lot heavier than that. This is fresh wood, but it doesn't look like that because it has been charred, burned. It's a fraud. It was built into the ice, and they took pictures, and now then it's all been destroyed by the moving glacier. Who were carried there by an individual who's been working with Parachute for a number of years, and who was there for and participated in the building of all of these sites that had been filmed and claimed to be Noah's Ark. He built it. As he put it, he was building a movie set. He was building something they could take a video of, then to show the world. And then he just got rather aggravated at the fact that he was supporting a lie and was willing to take us to the site and show it to us. According to him, they're actually beginning Monday building Noah's house on the other side of the mountain. And they're going to find that in about a year. And we're announcing it right now, but they're beginning Monday. And about a year from now, you'll hear that they found Noah's house. And this is the kind of thing that they've been doing for the past year. It's a deliberate and rather stupid fraud. You don't build something like this in a moving glacier. It's absurd. And you don't build it out of almost balsa wood, this light, fresh wood. Even though it's charred, if you only look at it through the camera lens, you can make it look pretty convincing. But then when you pick it up and hold it and look at it, it's obviously something else. It's a movie set, and that's a very accurate description.
There is a mountain in eastern Turkey known as Mount Ararat. It's a beautiful mountain, towering 17,000 feet above the Turkish frontier. It is also the mountain believed by many to hold one of mankind's greatest mysteries. For ever since man first began to write, it has been written that Mount Ararat was the landing place of Noah's Ark. History is full of men who have climbed Mount Ararat and seen the Ark. Accounts from 700 years before the birth of Christ relate to the experience of pilgrims climbing Ararat to scrape tar off the sacred vessel from which to fashion good luck omens. Berosus, the Babylonian high priest from the temple Bel-Marduk, states that in his time, around 300 BC, remains of the ark could still be seen, and some get pitch from the ship by scraping it off and use it for amulets. Hieronymus, Egyptian historian who authored the ancient history of Phoenicia about 30 BC, mentions the ark. Also about 30 BC, Nicholas of Damascus, the biographer of Herod the Great, tells of the ark landing near the summit and that relics of timber were still there. In 380 AD, Epiphanes, bishop of Salamis, visited the land of the Kurds and stated that he was shown wood from Noah's Ark. In the snow of Mount Ararat, wrote Armenian historian and world traveler Hyphon, one can see a black spot that is Noah's Ark, which he himself saw in 1254. Even Marco Polo, the renowned world traveler, wrote about Noah's Ark's presence on Mount Ararat in 1269 AD. Early history notes many such sightings of the Ark, but it hasn't been until recently that most major expeditions have scaled the dangerous slopes of Ararat and brought back proof of the Ark's existence. The reason, apparently, is the glacier. Mount Ararat is covered with an icy, snow-packed glacier. And for long periods of time, the summers are not warm enough to permit a sufficient meltback for climbers to reach the summit. And because of this, it was not until 1829 that Ararat was again successfully climbed. The man who did it was a German physician, Dr. Friedrich Parrot. He had heard of claims that at the Armenian monastery at Echmiadzin, there was a cross said to be made from the sacred wood of Noah's vessel. Parrot described the cross as being of a reddish-brown color, measuring about 12 inches by 9, and about an inch thick. After seeing the cross, he journeyed up Ararat to the 7,000-foot level. There he visited the St. Jacob Monastery. It was said that here were ancient Noahian relics and manuscripts. The monastery contained priceless remains of Noah's great voyage. Once he had finished in Ahura, Parrot continued on and successfully reached the summit of the hazardous Mount Ararat, but never sighted the Ark. Then, just 11 years later, in 1840, there was a massive earthquake. The monastery, like the 2,000 villagers of Ahura, were covered with debris during the destruction in June 1840. No one survived. Immediately after the earthquake, which caused death and destruction to all villages surrounding Ararat, Turkish authorities sent several teams of workers up the mountain to build protective barriers against avalanches. One of these teams reported the discovery of the forepart of a very old ship jutting out of a glacier. The expedition reported seeing the Ark 14,000 feet up Mount Ararat. They reported seeing several stalls and cages in the exposed interior of the great vessel. The Turkish report stirred additional overseas interest among scientists of that period. In 1876, a prestigious British statesman, jurist, and author, Sir James Bryce, made a dramatic and first time ever solo ascent of the mountain, and returned with a piece of evidence that seemingly should have shocked the scientific world into action. Braving the hostile environment of Ararat, Sir James uncovered and brought back to London a 4-foot-long, 5-inch thick piece of partially petrified hand-tool timber. He found the wood at 14,000 feet, where no trees had ever grown. And although newspaper headlines hailed the event, scientists scoffed at it. His discovery came when the theory of evolution was gaining in popularity, and most scientists of the time just chose not to believe him. Similar treatment was accorded a report issued by a Turkish commission in 1883. The commission, investigating avalanches on Mount Ararat, reported that they had seen Noah's Ark. Their report stated that they came upon a gigantic structure of very dark wood protruding from a glacier. It was in a good state of preservation. The Turkish government, irked by the disparaging treatment accorded this report by the world's newspapers and scientific leaders, did not follow up the discovery with another expedition. Despite this, 4 years later, another world traveler announced he would mount an expedition and attempt to locate the Ark.
Thank you, thank you.
His name was Prince John Joseph Nuri, the magnetic and astonishing Archbishop of Babylon. He began his ascent of the sacred mountain in 1887. On April 25th of that year, the prince realized his dream. He saw Noah's Ark. Prince Nuri reported that he found the Ark wedged in the rocks and half filled with snow and ice, that it was made of dark beams of very thick wood. His story further corroborated the 1883 Turkish newspaper account. Prince Nuri had hoped to return to Ararat to mount a major expedition. One of his proposals was to take the Ark to the Chicago Exhibition, the World's Fair of 1893. Nuri, however, was never able to gain financial support for this major expedition he longed to lead to Mount Ararat. The prince's secret, his route to the Ark on Mount Ararat, was lost forever when Nuri died unexpectedly from pneumonia. The next story to surface in the search for Noah's Ark took place in 1902, when as a boy, Armenian farmer Georgy Hagopian was taken to the Ark by his uncle. Illustrator Alfred Lee interviewed George Hagopian, and we asked him to recount the story to us.
George Hagopian was about 72 when I first met him in 1970. When he saw Noah's Ark, he was living in Turkey. He had been born at Lake Van, and he and his uncle would take their sheep and goats across to Mount Ararat every summer and graze their flocks on the mountain, as the Kurdish people do today. Every summer they go above the heat of the desert to graze the flocks in the meadows up there.
When they got to the Ark, George's uncle dropped his pack, and together they began to haul stones to the side of the ship. Within a short time, they had stacked a pile of rocks against the side of the Ark. Grabbing Georgie by the arm, his uncle said, "You are going on top of the Holy Ark." He put Georgie on his shoulders and said, "Grab the edge and pull yourself up." Georgie stood up straight on the roof and looked all over the ship. It was long. The height was almost 40 feet. There was a big black hole in the roof. He peeked into the blackness of the hole but saw nothing. Georgie then pulled a piece off the ark. It was made of wood. The grain was visible. He didn't see any nails. It seemed the whole ship was petrified wood. He remembered the roof was flat, with the exception of a narrow raised section running all the way from the bow to the stern, with many holes in it. His uncle told him these were holes for air. Georgie told him he was afraid, so his uncle let him come down.
My desire as an illustrator was to draw a picture of Noah's Ark as authentically as possible. When I went out there, I told him that I was very keenly interested in his guiding me in illustrating what he had seen. It took a year and a half. I drove between Eastern Shore, Maryland. He lived in Easton. And I lived in Washington. I'd go back and forth, and I would work on these sketches. I'd go over the tapes and all the pages of notes and sketches that I had. Finally, after a year and a half, I brought this picture out to him. He took the pen out of my hand and made these scratches right here. He said, "You neglected to put some rocks right here, as I remember it." But he said, "The rest of this, to the best of my memory, that's what Noah's Ark looked like."
This drawing by Lee was inspired by George's description and measurements of the ark. It is perhaps a definitive portrait of the vessel God asked Noah to build.
A large expedition, and another expedition 1918. So this makes, as far as we're concerned, 13 expeditions that the Russians have had to the Ark of Noah. He gave us quite an accurate account of his experience. He had met the officer of the USSR Air Force who had done the flying over a period of years from 1937 to 1947, 10 expeditions. And then he was shown, when Dr. Liedman met this man in Hamburg in 1947, he was shown 3 of the photos taken. And he had drawn a sketch for us of one of the photos that was presented to him by the platoon leader from the Russian USS Air Force. And this is that sketch. It shows the ark at about 14,000 feet, more or less, with the prow of the ship showing about 80 feet of the prow showing. And the prow apparently is in a small cirque or small body of water, seated on a cliff. And incidentally, this sketch corresponds with many other stories that we have. This is the interesting thing, so that we feel that there's authenticity to all that Dr. Liedman had to say and to the story of the Russian flyers.
Then in 1969, Fernand Navarre decided to climb the mountain again. The famous French explorer who'd startled the world in 1955 by finding wood agreed to join the Scientific Exploration and Archaeological Research Team, known as SEARCH. Navarro wanted to prove that he could lead another expedition back to the same ark embedded in the glacial ice pack on Ararat, and hopefully recover some more wood. After retracing Navarro's steps up the treacherous mountain, the search team struggled to locate wood in the same crevasses where Navarro found his 1955 wood. But the crevasses were not melted as deep as they were in 1955, and no wood was found in them. Then Navarro decided to probe the bottom of a small pond adjacent to the artifact ice pack. The team's probing poles did not reach to the bottom. Next, Navarro started probing a small runoff stream from the pond. At 11:15 on July 31st, 1969, Navarro and the search team struck pay dirt. 5 pieces of wood resembling planking with the longest piece nearly 17 inches long. This new additional find confirmed Navarro's discovery, and for many scientists proved conclusively that Noah had indeed stepped forth onto dry land here on Mount Ararat. The 1969 expedition supplied new evidence to support the broken ark theory. After finding the wood by the pond, scientists determined that a part of the ark was caught in a moving ice flow and was continually moving within the glacier. So if the ark was here, on the northwest side of the mountain, and if, during the earthquake and volcanic eruption of 1840, it was broken in half, then approximately half of the ark slid down about 2,000 feet to another ledge, leaving wood planks strewn in its path. The other half, probably the front, remained intact, wedged in the rocks above. This explains why, at times, the ark appears to be protruding from the ice intact. And this explains how Fernand Navarro was able to find wood from the ark here.
been 32 different reports that I've got of the structure being seen on that mountain, no place else.
If it's there, then people in the world ought to know about it.
Do I believe there's something there? Yes. What it is, don't know.
If you do see this boat sticking out of the ancient ice, it could change everything.
We saw some interesting anomalies. An anomaly is something that's not normal to the ice formation.
It has to be a cause bigger and greater than yourself to motivate you to do that.
We're going to climb that mountain.
This would be the biggest discovery in the history of the world. That mountain is a lurking beast that will just consume you if you make one small mistake.
We knew we were on the brink of what could be the greatest archaeological discovery so far.
We will either prove that yes, it is here, or no, it is not. We will either prove that yes, it is here, or no, it is not.
We will either prove that yes, it is here, or no, it is not. It is here, it is here, it is here, it is here.